Giving voice to a more just and sustainable world since 1979. WMNF Tampa, where music, news, and culture collide.
WMNF is more than just 88.5 FM. You can also find us online at WMNF.org. Check out the latest news stories, how to volunteer, future WMNF concerts, stream live or the latest episode of your favorite music shows, and more. And of course, you can always show your support by clicking on the Donate Now button. Explore your community at WMNF.org.
No jail time for the Uhuru. Spending time with Russian leader Vladimir Putin and African Initiative. It's Monday, December the 16th, and that means it's time for Community Speaks. You are tuned to Community Speaks here on WMNF Radio 88.5 FM. I'm your host, Patro Mabili. Members of the St. Petersburg-based Uhuru movement will not serve prison time for their role in an international conspiracy to spread Russian propaganda and sow political discord in the United States. A federal judge declared that today. U.S. District Judge William Jong sentenced O'Malley Yeshua, Penny Hess, and Jesse Neville to 3 years probation, punctuating a case that raised complicated questions of foreign relations, espionage, and free speech. And they also got 300 hours community service. They were found not guilty of being Russian agents and not telling the Attorney General. But the judge reiterated comments he made last week at the sentencing of a fourth defendant in the case, Augustus C. Romaine Jr., emphasizing that the case was rooted in political speech. And Romaine received 5 years probation. And meanwhile, the misinformation propaganda offensive continues on the part of Russia in the Sahel region of West Africa. Yevgeny Prigozhin, who died August 23rd, 2023, was a Russian mercenary leader and oligarch. He led the Wagner Group, a private military company, and was a close confidant of Russian President Vladimir Putin until launching a rebellion in June of 2023. He came for Putin's power and paid with his life. Now, Russia has changed tactics in the 3 African countries, and those who ran Wagner are now being hired to run the successor of the mercenary group called Africa Initiative. The new campaign, that's what it's called, is an effort by Russia billing itself as a news agency designed to expand the knowledge of Russians and Africans about each other. In reality, it is a propaganda tool. The Kremlin's disinformation campaign in Africa is, in addition to its own staff, Africa Initiative recruits African journalists, bloggers, and members of local publics to support and amplify the organization's work of bolstering Russia's image and denigrating that of other countries. We'll talk more about that this hour, but first I would like to highlight a book titled Midnight in Moscow. Midnight in Moscow, a memoir from the front lines of Russia's war against the West. And that was by John J. Sullivan. Sullivan served as U.S. ambassador to Russia from 2019 to 2022. He was there during Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and he writes about that particular time in this new memoir, Midnight in Moscow. He opens up to National Public Radio's Mary Louise Kelly about some of the other strange and even funny moments during his service, like what it's like to sit across the table from Vladimir Putin. So we'll take a listen to that for a few minutes here on Community Speaks. You're tuned to Community Speaks, and we'll talk about all of these issues that we've mentioned as we, on the other side of this talk with the ambassador to Russia from 2019 to 2022, John Sullivan.
John Sullivan served as U.S. ambassador to Russia from 2019 to 2022, appointed by then-President Trump, asked to stay on in the job by President Biden. He writes about it in Midnight in Moscow, a memoir from the front lines of Russia's war against the West. When I spoke with Ambassador Sullivan, I asked, does Putin's image of a ruthless but effective ex-KGB thug, does that square with reality?
Yes, but he doesn't give that appearance in person. He wants to strike a pose of such strength and confidence that he doesn't have to bluster. As I write in the book, he talks in a soft voice, but he makes it clear that he's in charge. He shows up late. He talks about what he wants to talk about.
He kept you waiting, right?
Yeah, he keeps everybody waiting, even the Pope. So I'm in good company. Yes. But he, when he's got this famous swagger that he walks with his right hand close to his hip and it doesn't move while his left arm swings. And the story that is told in Russia and that I'm sure he likes is that it's his KGB training to have his hand close to his sidearm on his hip. He gives the impression of being a gangster, but a classy gangster. It's sort of a Michael Corleone speaking in soft tones, in the shadows, doesn't have to move fast for anybody. He's in charge.
You say that the key to understanding him is realizing how very proud he is to call himself a Chekist. Can you briefly explain what that means?
So the Cheka was the secret police founded at the start of the Russian Revolution by Lenin, and the founder himself, Felix Dzerzhinsky, became the notorious enforcers of Lenin and the revolution as the secret police. They traced their lineage back to Ivan the Terrible's day, when the Oprichniki were Ivan the Terrible's bodyguards, and they rode big black horses and wore black leather coats. And the Cheka and Chekists to this day are identified with wearing black leather coats like the KGB did. So the Cheka lasted for, I believe, 4 years, 5 years. Mm-hmm. It had multiple successors thereafter in KVD, KGB, and then the KGB is split into the FSB and SVR. Putin is raised in that culture. He is of the KGB. He identifies as a Chekist. And he famously says there is no such thing as a former KGB man. Once you're in, you're in.
It's a lifer. You're a lifer.
It's a lifer.
Yeah.
And that's definitely his view.
Tell the story. I'm thinking you had to deal with all kinds of challenges from, tensions between the Kremlin and the White House down to just ordinary life in Russia. Tell the story of trying to buy an iPad in Moscow and what you took from it.
So I had an old iPad that I brought with me from the United States when I arrived as ambassador, and it was my link to back home. I did Zoom calls with my family from the iPad, but it was old and it conked out. And I needed a new iPad, and I spoke to the security folks at the embassy, and it was going to take months for me, this is during the pandemic, to get an iPad shipped to me in Moscow. So my alternative was to go to an electronics store in Moscow and buy an Apple iPad. Mm-hmm. Now, everyone knew, I knew, that as soon as I bought that iPad, that it would be penetrated by the security services, so I could never, for example, ever bring it to the embassy. I would only use it the way I had used my old iPad. So I went to the electronics store on a Saturday morning, unannounced, and my bodyguards came in and translated for me, and there were big stacks of exactly the type of iPad I wanted. And I walked over to a stack, I pointed at the stack, and I pointed at the iPad that I wanted. Because I had bodyguards and I needed translation and my face as the ambassador,
they saw you coming, is what you're telling us.
They saw me coming, but they had to do a little bit of a scramble because they didn't want to just give me the iPad. So the clerk said, we'll take it and you can pick it up tomorrow. And there were other people who were coming into the store, taking iPads from the same stack, going to the checkout line, paying for them, and walking out. I said, no, thanks. I'll just take this right now. I'll pay for it, and I'll be on my way. They said, sorry, this isn't ready for you. And I immediately knew it didn't take a sleuth to figure out what was going on, that they needed to make certain arrangements for my iPad. They said, you'll wait very little time. So rather than fight, I just realized what was going on, and I said, okay. And I went back to the embassy and told our security folks, and everyone just sort of chuckled. What my reaction, though, was I would have thought that they had more sophisticated ways to access my iPad rather than such a blunt, no, pardon us while we load what we
rewired us
need.
Completely.
And they should have had a better way of accessing my laptop than just being so blunt about it. But they don't care. They are dedicated. They, the Russian government, the FSB, and their counterintelligence section that smothers the U.S. Embassy. They have thousands, approaching 10,000 officers, somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000 officers whose sole job is to smother the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, follow every person, diplomat, family member, spouse, young child who leaves the compound. And getting access to my iPad was part of that mission.
When you did wrap up your service, you wanted to write a cable back to Washington, kind of taking stock of what you had experienced and what you learned. And you lay out a bunch of observations. I want to focus you on one, that the strategy for the U.S. has to be a form of 21st century containment of Russian aggression. Practically speaking, what does that actually look like?
Here's what I'd say. We need to have not just a strategy for the Russian war in Ukraine, but for Russia and its aggression. And it needs to be baked into our budgeting, our strategic planning. We're spending $1 trillion a year almost to defend the United States. And it is emphatically the case that stopping Russian aggression in Ukraine is vital to the defense of the United States. And I mentioned in the book, we tried ignoring huge land wars in Europe twice in the 20th century. Both times we failed. We cannot ignore Russian aggression because it will not stop.
John Sullivan. His new memoir is titled Midnight in Moscow. Ambassador, thank you.
Pleasure.
You're listening to Community Speaks here on your community radio station, WMNF. I'm your host, Patro Mobili, and we're just focusing in a little bit on Russia. That was the ambassador who wrote a book, Midnight in Moscow. The book is a focus on today, just one of the books of the day that I think we should be reading because, there's a lot going on in the continent of Europe, but also the continent of Africa as it relates to Russia. And, the shenanigans, the schemes that are being engaged in right now go beyond just misinformation. When it comes to Africa, the African Initiative is one of those Russian initiatives that have been designed to replace the mercenaries who were sent to those 3 African nations that suffered military coups and now are ruled by military juntas. In a couple of cases, Russia is using some of the extractive industries, the counterpower of uranium. And the idea is to get the Africans to not provide their uranium, and Putin can then hold it against Europe for this winter. As a result, Europe is really concerned about this, not just misinformation, but Russia's war in Ukraine, these dangerous materials that are out there, and the use of the uranium, especially as a counterpower for the energy sector. The European economies are going to be in reactionary mode. And right now, Europe is silently, quiet as it's kept, gearing up for World War III. And with 45 coming back to power in the United States, the threat that Ukraine will no longer get support from the United States. NATO is having to ramp up its military budgets beyond just the 2% that they've agreed to put into their budgets because now they're concerned about a real hot kinetic situation on the continent of Europe. Meanwhile, Africa is being used as pawns in these designs, these Russian designs. So this is a very critical moment, very critical time. And we need to talk about just exactly what is going on, what is at stake, and how disinformation is dangerous. African Initiative is a new information agency focused on Africa-Russia relations that has spread disinformation regarding the United States and European countries. And as I said earlier, in addition to its own staff, African Initiative recruits African journalists, bloggers, and members of local publics to support and amplify the organization's work of bolstering Russia's image and denigrating that of other countries. I've seen reports where the journalists and bloggers, the African journalists and bloggers, have been picked up by Russians and shipped to Europe into the Donetsk region of Ukraine so that they could learn how to deliver reports from the Russian perspective on the war in Ukraine. One African journalist referring to where she was in the Donetsk region as west of or east of Ukraine. So it's interesting what kinds of disinformation is being taught right now so that the Africans on the continent will hear this disinformation from people who look like them, this Russian propaganda. One of the African Initiative's first major campaigns is to target, as I said, U.S. and Western health initiatives in Africa with dangerous health-related disinformation. The campaign seeks to undermine U.S.-funded public health projects across Africa, beginning with disinformation regarding an outbreak of a mosquito-borne viral disease. And from there, conspiracies will be spread about Western pharmaceutical corporations and health-focused philanthropic efforts and the spread of disease in West and East Africa. The editor-in-chief of the African Initiative is a guy by the name of Artem Kureyev, who is also the general director of Initiative 23, publicly registered to an office in Moscow. And some members of the African Initiative were recruited from the disintegrating enterprises of the mercenaries leaders organization Wagner Yevgeny Prigozhin. So the organization already has local offices in Ouagadougou, in Burkina Faso, in Bamako, in Mali, and is hosting the events on the ground. He's taking around these African journalists and basically getting them to help spread this disinformation for African ears. The African Initiative primarily spreads this propaganda via numerous branded and unbranded social media accounts. Two of his main accounts, as I said, are called African Initiative, and the other one is called African Kalishnikov. The organization is highly active on its website, and it uses platforms and others amplified by additional pro-Russian accounts. So the idea is to send out positive images and discourses on Russia of the Kremlin and disinformation about everybody else, especially when it comes to these health-related issues, which is a dangerous way of fomenting disinformation. You could call and join this discussion. What we've seen is that not only is this going on, and this information is coming from the U.S. State Department. It's called Global Engagement Center. They were recently trying to expose the Kremlin's attempts to undermine global support for Ukraine by covertly spreading disinformation in Latin America. The core tactic there in that campaign involved laundering Moscow-produced content through local individuals and groups to make pro-Kremlin disinformation and propaganda seem organic to the communities in which it was spread. And following the disruption of that operation, the Russian government is now trying the same tactic on the continent of Africa with a new set of actors and entities. And what we've seen is that same kind of operation has taken place inside the United States. If the Kremlin can find internal organizations inside the United States because it sees the United States as its main counterbalance, that it needs to counterbalance in the world. And that's the whole purpose of the disinformation. And if you can find an internal organization to criticize the West in general, but the United States in particular, and really Democrats specifically, then you're going to be recruited, or there's going to be an attempt to recruit you to help spread that disinformation inside the United States, which was what the charge was on the Uhuru movement here in the St. Petersburg area. Of course, the Uhuru said support of Russia is free speech, but that doesn't mean that they were working for the Russians, and constantly had to reiterate to them that they don't work for you, Kremlin. So, but the jury decided that while they were not guilty of being Russian agents, the Uhurus did seem to engage in some conspiracy to help sow this division and spread disinformation. And so for that, the Uhurus were sentenced today. And as I said earlier, it looks like they're going to only spend 300 hours of doing public, they're going to be doing some public community service hours. 300 hours of that is, just wanted to make sure I got it right. But the judge has also said they will only spend 3 years on probation. And unlike the fourth defendant, will spend 5 years on probation. So that's the story this morning as we're waking up to. That's really good news for the Uhuru movement, that they won't be doing any jail time. African People's Socialist Party Chairman Omali Yeshitela is 83 years old. And so I am personally happy to know that he will not be spending any time in jail behind what Russia has attempted to do here inside the United States. But this disinformation campaign is part and parcel of Russia's engagement with the world right now. And so we do have to go in eyes wide open. Africans are coming under a lot of duress from the military juntas, because there are some, at least in Mali, I believe, the prime minister wanted to get the junta to go back to the barracks and allow elections to occur. And they fired him because it doesn't look like the junta is ready to leave or want to leave, and do want to have control over the resources that their European masters once had control over and continue to maintain control over, which is part of the propaganda that Russia uses on the continent of Africa. As a result, here is one French company that was, I think, named Orano, that was mining uranium in one of these African countries. And as I said, Russia has convinced them to throw that company out. But in the meantime, nobody is running the uranium plant, and uranium is not being produced, I guess, until Russia decides that it wants it. And so it will use it as a economic counterpoint against Europe over the coming winter months. And as I said, this is a dangerous situation in that a hot war could break out as a result of all of this. So between spreading disinformation and getting Europe geared up for war, this is a dangerous time. And so we have to be very cognizant of when we are being used as pawns in other people's designs. This is a very old trick that we are constantly finding ourselves in such a position to be pawns. And so that's the purpose of continuing to have these type conversations. But I do want to hear from you. We're halfway through the program right now. And of course, next hour, we're going to get back to the music. But right now, we're in the middle of this public affairs program called Community Speaks. Very interested in talking to you about what has transpired and transpiring so far, not just here locally, but internationally, and what it all means 813-239-9663 is the number to call if you want to call me and talk to me and your community about what is happening around here and what we're talking about on the global stage, especially how the world tensions are rising right now, especially in the middle of all else that is happening in the world. 813-239-9663 is the number to call. Of course, going and talking about we have to remember to talk about the growing politics inside this country. Of course, we know that 45 is on his way back to the White House, has had a friendly relationship with Putin. But of course, the moment 45 walks back into the White House and gets inaugurated and walks back into the White House, he's immediately a lame duck. There are going to be Republicans waiting to take his job, waiting to replace him, be the successor to the MAGA chief right now, and see if they can have the magic that he seems to have at the ballot box. But in the meantime, part of the promise that he's made to the MAGA crowd, the MAGA mob, was that he will have mass deportations. And of course, a lot of these are just empty promises. We said that Mexico was going to pay for that wall. Only a few miles of that wall has been built. Mexico didn't pay a penny for any of it, and it doesn't work anyways. And there are a lot of people waiting to trying to get to the border right now because asylum is a totally different animal, and a lot of people are fleeing violence. There's one story of a 69-year-old Honduran mother who had never imagined leaving her Central American country, but then came to anonymous death threats to her and her children, and armed men who showed up at her doorstep threatening to kill her, just like they had killed one of her relatives just a few days early. They requested anonymity out of concern for her safety and spent her life savings of $10,000 on a one-way trip north at the end of October with her daughter and her granddaughter. But after her asylum petitions to the U.S. were rejected, they were loaded onto a deportation flight. Now she's back in Honduras within reach of the same gang, stuck in a cycle of violence and economic precarity that haunts deportees like me, or like her. That was a direct quote from her. I'm going to keep her anonymity, but we're talking about a 69-year-old Honduran mother. But, you know, so the politics and the implications of this politics, especially the human rights implications, are staggering just because some people want to be entertained by the politics of a strong man. 813-239-9663 is the number to call if you want to join the discussion here on Community Speaks. My sister Irene is sitting waiting to take your telephone calls and get them in to me. So we're going to go to Sarasota and see what Mike has to offer by way of comment here on Community Speaks. Go ahead, Mike. You're on the air.
Thanks, Mabili, for taking my call. I think I have lived a full life because I now have lived to see you become what I think is a CIA asset. In your previous talk, you were quoting the U.S. State Department for a perspective on international affairs, and you're describing Russia as the aggressor. And I just want to ask you a question. Don't you realize that in this world, in terms of the aggressor, the United States is the leading aggressor in the world? And if you don't believe me, ask the Palestinians, where we're sponsoring mass genocide upon them, or the Syrians, where our puppet Israel has just bombed them 800 times in the last week since they liberated themselves from Assad. Or you can ask the Syrians, where we sponsored the civil war in Syria. Or you can go to Panama, Mexico. You can go to Nicaragua, or the whole Western Hemisphere, where our policy of Monroe Doctrine asserts our hegemony over all these people. So I think that, yes, I mean, I'm not saying that the Russians are wonderful people, but in terms of who's the leading aggressor, you seem to have lost perspective on who is. Well, now repeating the U.S. State Department, the Biden administration, and the CIA line. And I would ask you to reconsider.
Okay, well, that's fair. I'll reconsider. But I think that right now you can't overlook the fact that, you know, there's real aggression in the world, and we know historical aggression. I'm not naive. I know about historical aggression. I know that we've seen administrations inside the United States who have used aggression, especially Republican administrations that were quick to go to war. Democrats have to clean up the efforts afterwards. And yeah, I'm going by a lot of what I'm reading from the State Department, but also from journalists on the ground, from people who are activists and feeling like their human rights are constantly at stake or under threat from Russia. And right now, a lot of people look to the United States and Europe to basically be a protector, protect one another. And so, what kind of world do you want to live in, really? I mean, do you want to just ignore the lies and the disinformation and call everybody a liar? We could all live in such a world, but at some point you got to be able to believe in something or believe somebody, because we can't all be on the ground everywhere. So, it really is about what makes sense. If it isn't true, if it doesn't make sense, it isn't really true. But you can't just ignore things because historically something has happened. We have to look at the world as it is, and that's all I attempt to do right now. That doesn't mean we're naive. We're just trying to keep our eyes wide open. Go ahead, Daryl from Tampa. Go ahead.
And some people wonder why, I watch Star Trek. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that is true fiction, even though I love space travel. One of two things. I wonder now, since that the illustrious Donald Trump is now president, one of three things. You in Sarasota, you can take down your Trump flags now, okay? Waving them like, the American flag, but take your Trump flags down. And number two, I wonder, when will they start chiseling off the statement on the Statue of Liberty? Give me your... How does it go?
You're tired, you're poor, in huddled masses.
Yearning to be free.
Mm-hmm.
The wretched refuge, send them to these teeming shores. I guess that would be all the Puerto Ricans, since Puerto Rico is refuge now.
No, that was when the only way in was the Ellis Island.
Let me get off the airmobile, because I know you ain't got that much time, and you got a lot of callers. I think, didn't he just digress on one of his promises? Oh, no. Donald Trump went back on one of his promises. Groceries are not going to come down.
No.
Oh, wow. You mean the eggs, the chickens, the chicken's leg, they're going to be more expensive, and the lettuce and the cabbage and the stuff, we're going to kick all the migrants out. So who going to pick all the all the stuff out there in the field? We going to get some of these, everybody that's white, they're techno. I don't mean to bring race into this.
Mm-hmm.
People who are white, y'all going to go out there in the fields and pick peas and cabbage and lettuce and stuff. Machines can't do all of that stuff. You got to have a human hand involved with that. And y'all going to go out there and get migrant pay.
Mm-hmm.
You ain't going to get $18 an hour to pick a head of lettuce. Goodbye.
Yeah, bye there. And they'll actually probably use prison labor. Go ahead, Steve in Tampa. You want to add what here on Community Speaks?
Hey, Mabili, how you doing?
Pretty good.
Good. I called in 2016, and it was the year Obama was elected, and I said, it's not Obama that I'm concerned with, because I didn't agree with it and I didn't vote for him. But I pointed out Nancy Pelosi. I knew she was a snake in the grass. But what I wanted to call in is I appreciate you, because I've listened. I haven't donated since then, but I've listened to you on Sunday morning, and I've listened to you for a long time. My point is this. It's a nasty, evil, mean world out there. And just like the caller before, racist, white people. Mabili, this is crazy, bro. I'm just like, the world's real, and it's mean.
Yeah.
And you guys keep saying, racism, and and democracy. I'm just calling to say you got to give it a chance. You got to give it a chance. When Biden was elected, I gave it a chance again, and I wrote it through.
Yeah, we don't have a choice but to give it a chance, don't we? The election is over.
You guys aren't.
What do you mean?
I'm calling about. You don't give it a chance.
What do you mean?
It's
just because we're talking?
Huh?
Oh, we are doing propaganda?
You are, and that's my opinion. Because
okay, that's definitely your opinion. I do nothing but facts here, Steve. I'm sorry. I'm through talking to you right now because, you're ignoring the propaganda, especially on the right wing side, the lies and the fact that they are accommodating that from Russia. Russia has to engage in propaganda. That's really all it knows how to make right now. It went on and created a whole internet department so that it can spread propaganda. Now it wants to use people who are not Russian, but who look like the people that they want to lie to and got them lying to people. So, but you guys want to, say that truth tellers are propagandizing. You have a president whose whole imagery is built on lies and propaganda. He told like 35, 40, 50,000 lies in his last campaign and just got reelected, in his last presidency, and just got reelected by half of you. And you guys it all fell on deaf ears that he's a liar. And you just say everybody's a liar. But now you're saying that the people who are here bringing you the facts are the propagandists, and the propagandists are the ones that you're believing. You have people who are propagandizing about vaccines still and are ready to step into power. And, you have parents who remember the whole polio scene in this country, and yet their voices are drowned out because of propagandists, because of liars. And they are the ones who stand to gain. You have Elon Musk, the growing oligarchy in this country, who is spreading disinformation. So disinformation is the way of those who seek power right now. And those of us who are here at the bottom, who are the working class, we're the real working class heroes. And we're just telling the truth. And clearly the truth hurts. Clearly the truth is not helping those who want to keep us all ignorant, keep us all asleep. It's not a good time for you because too much is being revealed. And as a result, you guys have to keep lying, those who support these liars. And I think that we just have to make certain we keep calling it out. I'm bringing you the facts. Everybody here at our news department and all of our public affairs shows, we bring the fact. In fact, I want to give a shout out to all of those who just won the Creative Loafing's Best of the Bay here at WNF, because, this is a whole region that recognizes the work that is being done by voices like ours and in the world right now. And I think the people are pretty wide awake, even though there's a political movement to keep people asleep. 813-239-9663 is the number to call. This is Community Speak. Some of your hosts, Patrick and Mobili, got a few more minutes left. I'm going to go see what Ron in Mango has to say. Go ahead, Ron, my brother. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, Mobili. I was sitting here listening to everything, and you was doing a pretty good job. Excellent, I must say, as you was laying it out. But some of these people, not even so much right-wing people, it's just people that's been brainwashed and propagandized as far as it is, to think that you would be the problem would be ad hominem, a legal term. They don't have any other outlet, so they claim you to be the problem that exists versus the problem that exists is the problem. Mm-hmm. And I was calling because locally I was just saying I would know some people that had the effects of our so-called electric crisis here. I received one in the mail. I think it was $600 for the hurricane storm. That was my reward, grant, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so this is what we get. You get people ignoring that people are in crisis and they need help and bails out, but they'll turn around and they'll pat themselves on the back. And the biggest thing I was going to say about that conversation you was having, I'll get off the phone, is that they're in denial. It's clear. You know, you're dealing with people that's been in denial all the time. When they go backwards to try to take something back from you that's already been precedented and set by people who was of good conscience, supposedly mind. Now you got people who are unconscious and supposedly of not good sound mind taking things back.
Yeah, this move to go backwards. What's that about?
Atheism, that's what it is. It's called atheism, and they've been backwards, so I don't know why they want somebody else to go that way, but anyway, I'll leave it at that. Yeah. Well, I appreciate the show, and the other thing was, Belay, why isn't the Russian guy on trial? Kudos to the Hour House as always, but why wasn't the Russian guy on trial who supposedly was the person that of interest? Why he just disappear into the dark, ride off on his horse into the sunset?
Yeah, well, I guess because he's not a citizen, and then they were investigating him, so that's how they.
Oh yeah, they
got the name.
Sort of like sort of like when we brought the Nazi German scientists here after the Great World War, and put them in Nassau and put them in all kind of places like they did nothing at all.
Right. Needed that knowledge. Wanted to transfer that knowledge.
I'd like people to understand this. That's the where we got our medical decorum and our medical science headed right now from those same people. That's why they like to do a lot of dicing and slicing and prescribing. Because of that mentality they had, that experimentation, on people and whatever. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's our medical society we have today. Much of it, because it's all Western, they call it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's another topic. You have a good one, man.
You too. You too, definitely. Thank you for calling. 813-239-9663. This is Community Speaks. Of course, this is always an opportunity to talk to you. But, it's a terrible thing when people get caught up in disinformation. People die. People go to jail. People get caught up. That is, the Hurus have gotten caught up. It's why it's awfully important for us to keep our eyes wide open and recognize what is happening on the globe. There are people who are trying to use you. There are people who want to exploit you and dumb you down because that's how fascists operate. That's how they maintain their power and keep people divided. And one of the things we're seeing here, of course, is this huge divide over immigration, and a lot of people are responding to that, what is happening inside of this country, and the promises that are being made that clearly won't be kept. None of it's going to be kept. The economy is going to struggle. The Federal Reserve is probably going to look at cutting rates one more time so that we try to bring down inflation and get a soft landing that they think they're getting inside this economy right now, a soft landing. But everything's going to be blown way out of proportion if you start trying to engage in mass deportations and you start engaging in tariffs and tariff wars with other countries who will retaliate, don't see anything to negotiate. And, of course, this disinformation on the part of Russia is going to lead to tensions rising on the continent of Europe. And as I said, we're getting reports that they're looking to arm themselves. They're looking to brace themselves for major conflict on that continent. And this usually ensnares other countries in the world. And I'm pretty sure Africans will get caught up in any kind of conflagration that goes on coming out of Europe or between Europeans. And we're seeing this conflict on whether or not to continue to support Ukraine, which is going to be key as to whether or not we see large-scale conflagration on the continent. But we see that there's an attempt right now to blunt support for Ukraine. and that's including right here in this country. Who knows what will come of that, and how many people will get ensnared in the violence that will continue to escalate if the tensions continue to rise. We see tensions in the Middle East, and do we have the type leadership coming inside this country with this new administration, the return of the old administration, and the cast of characters that are going to be in the cabinet that's going to be representing this country and its policies on the global stage. And there's not much that a Congress can do to stop a president from acting globally oftentimes. So, there's a lot of chance for misstepping and using your loose lips to sink ships. And I'm pretty sure that the 45 montage of the mantra of let's just stay out of it is going to loom large, this isolationism. But is it already too late to stay out of it, especially if you're talking about trade wars and you're talking about letting Russia do what the hell it wants in the middle of a crisis, a tension-filled continent that has historically led to world war? Are you really thinking about leadership? Do you really know what you're doing? Or are the voters just busy being entertained and just having too much fun with the entertainment? And of course, we're seeing the conversation in this country taking new lows when it comes to violence, the death of a CEO. If you think that's going to change the healthcare system, insurance system, especially for those of us at the bottom of the economy, you're not thinking clearly. This guy thinks violence is the answer to everything. He had everything handed to him. Why is it that these rich guys think that death and violence is the answer to everything? That comes from even 45 on down, that, violence is the answer. And so, we have to keep, as I said, our eyes wide open. And we have to keep talking about these issues and putting these things into perspective, or we're going to lose, we're going to have a social explosion in this country, and people are not going to understand who to blame. But I do know that one of the simplest things to do is to blame the person in charge. And if the person in charge is making promises and plans that we're all being told is going to tank this economy and plunge the world into more violence and continue to misinform people, then at some point, some of us will wake up, and the fight back will begin in tandem. And I don't care how many people are brainwashed. If you can't eat, you'll wake up pretty soon. 813-239-9663 is the number to call. I just want to get as many calls in and read your emails as well. You could also write me, DJ, at WMNF.org. A couple of you have written telling me to accept that 45 is now 47. No, not yet. Not until Inauguration Day, because anything can happen between now and Inauguration Day. But once 47 occurs, then we'll think about calling them something else. But actually, it doesn't even really matter to me. 813-239-9663 is the number to call. This is Community Speaks. In a few more minutes, enough time to talk to a few more people to see what you have to add about the state of the world right now. So let me go to Newport Richie, see if Bob wants to say something. We're getting close to the end of time right now, so go quickly to your comments, and we'll see what we could do about what you're saying, and we'll then have to get on out and make room to get back to the music. So real quickly, Bob, go ahead. You're on Community Speaks.
Real quickly, I always thought your format was open air, and you were to let other people have their views spoke, but seems like you're rambling on there. I just timed you for 6 minutes. And it's like there's other people that want to get in their little say. Last thing I got to say before Christmas, your buddy Biden has still got a month to go to screw our country up. Good luck.
All right. Well, there's a lot of positive talk, negative talk about those who are in power now, but you think that the country is screwed up. You don't remember what it was, and just get ready for what it's going to be. So, I'm really not into this back and forth politics. I want to hear some real analysis, and that's what I've been trying to bring. So, yeah, Bob, I'm going to keep talking until somebody calls, and nobody had called. Somebody did write. I read that email, but it looks like that's going to be my time. I'm going to go ahead and get on out and make room to get back to the music, but I do want to give a shout out to a few people. There's, like I said, our news department have been named one of the Best of the Bay Awards. Florida Association of Broadcast Journalists give a news award to the WMNF News team for the educational reporting. Janet and Tom Schoberger were the finalists for public affairs. I wanted to give a shout out to Mitch Perry. He's the winner for beat reporting, policy and politics, Florida Association of Broadcast Journalists. Megan Bowman, she's the winner of the Edward R. Morrow Award, Excellence in Podcast, and Florida Association of Broadcast Journalists for the podcast Sunshine State Awards. I guess the Sunshine State Awards for podcasts, and the finalists for the Mark of Excellence Award, Society of Professional Journalists. And Christopher Gorman is the winner of being the best activist. It's part of the Creative Loafing's Best of the Bay. But I wanted to give a special shout out to one of our music shows, WNF, on Saturday night, with the best spirit of Kenny K, one of our best DJs who passed away a few years ago, a couple of decades ago. And we still remember him here at WMNF and commemorate him. And so we want to give a shout out to Saturday night's program, the Saturday Night Shutdown, and for keeping the best spirit of Kenny K. And so just wanted to make sure we got those shout outs. So I'm going to get on out and make room for music, getting back to the music here on your community radio station, WMNF. I just hope at the end of the day you appreciated the conversation and your eyes are open to what's happening in the world. The disinformation that Russia is engaging in has hit home, and thanks to the judge for seeing it for what it was. And those Uhuru members will not face jail time. So that's a great thing here on this Monday. Some good news right here. Nobody needs to be sitting in jail for that. 813, this has been WMNF here at 88.5 FM. And you can continue to write me. You can write DJ at WMNF.org, or you can write, just write DJ at WMNF.org. But go to WMNF.org and listen to the archives and stay tuned to WMNF as we get back to the music with Blaney Whalen and take you on into the afternoon. So keep it tuned. This is WMNF Tampa. National Public Radio News will come your way next. And following that, of course, we'll get back to the music. It's the Music Monday, WMNF Tampa.
Overwhelmed with serious volumes. Policing is less effective. On the block is quite adaptive. Even to hell and back, there's no welcome mat. Whole families move to where the ghetto's at. The ghetto is destroyed remains of a hood that had more to gain. Instead of fixing it, the condition is unlawful detainers and eviction slips. The rich moving in, the poor moving out. In the heart of the hood, what is it all about? Move or get lost, we can't afford the cost. $100,000 lofts, man, that shit is off. Systematic, homie, it ain't an accident. Waking up near a strip